Capitol waiting game. When and how will the state Supreme Court rule on the lawsuit filed by Republican leaders to block Governor Tony Evers' extension until May 26th? And Evers orders a 5% cut in state agency spending through June 30. Republican leaders praised that move, which the governor said will save $70 million. Wisconsin Democrats say the COVID-19 emergency means they must hold a virtual state convention June 12. And the stock picker is back for the May 1 edition of Rewind, your week in review.
I'm Steve Walders.
I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind for a week in which Capitol reporters like J.R. and I and reporters across the state are staying close to our cell phones, staying close to our laptops. Every time the Supreme Court of Wisconsin issues an order, we go, oh, this could be the big one. And the background, of course, is Republican legislators sued the governor, saying the governor's extension of the safe-at-home order until May 6 is unconstitutional. So before I ask JR to comment on who all filed amicus in this case, let's just listen to some of the arguments in this case. Governor Evers and let's talk, first from the Department of Justice, State law gives the Department of Health Services Secretary broad authority to respond to a rare public health crisis like COVID-19, and the extension of the governor's safer-at-home order until May 26 was justified to control and suppress communicable diseases. That was the State Department of Justice defending the governor's order. Let's hear from Rick Essenberg, president of Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, arguing the other side. Governor Evers and deputies have taken an overly expansive approach to how power and decision-making is made in Wisconsin. It is vital that the court reestablishes the proper balance to the separation of powers and prohibit rule of the state by executive branch without input from the people and oversight of the legislature. Okay, JR, one thing that struck me, the number of groups and individuals that filed amicus here, I've just listed a few of them, religious groups and those on behalf of the disabled, hunters, fishers, Indian tribes. Talk about all the amicus that were allowed in. Unions were tossed out, but then did they come back in?
Yeah. So there were a group of 4 unions, including the locals representing Milwaukee, Madison teachers. They really wanted to intervene in the case. That is a higher bar than filing a friend of court brief. And so originally they filed that brief. The court said, no, you're not going to intervene. We're going to reject your brief because it was well beyond the limit they set for these amicus briefs. But, a lot of it was groups trying to raise unique issues that are pertain to them personally when it comes to this situation. I don't know that those filings are going to sway the court dramatically. Because really the heart of the case is what is the extent of the legislative power versus the executive power when it comes to this order. And remember, it wasn't Governor Evers who issued the second order to extend the stay-at-home directive, right? It was DHS Secretary Andrea Palm.
At the behest of the governor, yes.
About what the limits are of her powers and whether she's exceeding the powers the governor even has, and if she should be doing what's called the emergency rule process. That is basically agencies can take and promulgate a rule which puts a policy in place, but that procedure includes legislative oversight. Lawmakers argue by being successful in this court case, they would force the Evers administration to the table to negotiate. Evers folks counter that what you're doing here is if you are successful, you will endanger the health and safety of Wisconsinites because you'll slow down the process and handcuff the executive branch of what it's trying to do. Then there's this little, if you're a geek, a standing issue. Standing means whether you are even able to file the lawsuit. And one of the points raised in the briefs this week was, did the legislature, the GOP-controlled legislature, follow proper procedure and file this suit? Because they have been involved, Republican lawmakers, in a number of legal actions. They have got attorneys who've got legal bills stacking up, but they did not vote ahead of filing this to have the Joint Committee Legislative Organization to expressly authorize the suit. One of the points is, well, do you even have standing to file this? After filing the lawsuit, JCLO issued a paper ballot to expressly authorize this. Again, this is a geek kind of thing, but there is a standing question the court has to address possibly for deciding, okay, while we're going to get to the merits of this lawsuit in our ruling.
Okay, and now let's, as we did last week, let's talk about the potential options. The court could take this case and they could order oral arguments, or they could issue a ruling. They could say, we're not taking it now, we're going to let it play out in the lower courts, or they could take the case and issue a ruling enjoining extension of safer at home. Any other options I haven't covered, JR?
No, remember too that Republicans originally asked for the court to issue an injunction preventing enforcement of the second stay-at-home order, but they wanted a 6-day delay in that injunction taking place. Now, I thought it was interesting in the new filing from Republican lawmakers this week, they now are asking the court to use its best judgment essentially and how long to stay that order. Here's a little, again, kind of deep in the weeds thing, but Brian Hagedorn, a conservative member of the court, he's a former chief legal counsel to then Governor Scott Walker. He knows intimately how the rules process plays out. That might be a nod, some people have told me, to that experience Hagedorn has, and that maybe 6 days isn't workable. So maybe the court does 10 days or 2 weeks. I mean, I'm just throwing out options there, but that's one thing to watch for. Is it, if the court sides with Republicans, does it issue the injunction? And two, what's the stay on that injunction? Is it 6 days or longer? Then it becomes a question of, okay, can two sides, Governor Tony Evers, and then on one side, and Robin Vos and Scott from the other, can they actually work out a deal? Don't forget, in the past 15 months, we can count in one hand the number of compromises they've reached on anything, really. So it could be tough sledding for a deal among these guys if the court sides Republicans.
The court jumped immediately. Let's go back to the back and forth legally before the April 7 election. Our Supreme Court jumped immediately on the governor's order. I almost anticipated that our court would jump immediately and rule by now on this. Neither of us are lawyers, and we don't know what's happening, but we likely to see, do you think, your opinion, a court ruling next week?
Well, I asked people, okay, how might this play out? And one kind of theory I heard, and it's a theory, so take it with a grain of salt. I mean, the court could issue a ruling as we're taping the show right now, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a possibility. But an idea was that first the court would vote, where they're at on the case, the merits. There will be a majority opinion drafted. You have to give any dissenters time to write their point of view. And then kind of this another in the weeds kind of thing. Rebecca Bradley, a conservative member of the court, she has been very vocal about wanting to rein in executive branch powers. Daniel Kelly also has been there in some of their cases. So you've seen past cases dealing with this issue where Bradley has issued, and Kelly too, concurring opinions. So you could see a scenario where there are multiple papers that come out as part of the decision. So that could take you until early next week to get something done. But I don't rule anything out. The court could do something today for all we know, and act quickly. Now, in this business, I try not to be surprised. Like, that's one thing you try not to be, try to make sure that it happen. And one thing I keep remembering is, remember, this court itself, the Supreme Court, suspended jury trials for 6 weeks. That brought a scathing dissent from Bradley, who said you're violating the Sixth Amendment rights of those who are accused. So don't forget, the court has done some things that maybe you wouldn't have expected in a normal, quote unquote, situation because of COVID-19. So how is that going to, will that play at all into how this case plays out?
Right. Okay. But let's turn to another version of the safer at home debate. The governor, he used the term turning the dial. I'm going to use license here and say he tweaked the dial a little bit on this week when he announced some changes allowing some small businesses to reopen. First, let's hear from the governor, please.
Under our Safer at Home order, every business across our state can do things like deliveries, mails, curbside pickup, and curbside drop-off. So, for example, whether you're an upholsterer, a taxidermist, a dog groomer, or you rent recreational equipment like kayaks, paddle boats, or canoes, you'll be able to provide some of those services under the Safer at Home order. And yesterday, we announced that the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources will be reopening 34 of our state parks, forests, and recreational areas that were closed earlier this month due to unprecedented crowds and out of an abundance of caution to protect public health. You've heard me say many times that this virus sets our timeline, and we have to approach this like turning a dial, not flipping a switch. Believe me, I understand that is a frustrating answer. Small businesses can't operate on hypotheticals. Workers can't pay their rent with a promise of a future economic recovery. There's nothing I would love more than to provide some certainty on when we can open up more of our economy. While we can't control this virus, we can control how the state responds to it. And what we need is a unified, bipartisan approach, not a partisan lawsuit that puts people's lives at risk. Safer at Home is working. It is saving lives. It is the best and most effective tool we have to save lives and prevent our hospitals from being overrun.
JR, let's look a little deeper at the governor's actions on Monday and Tuesday. Just to repeat a little bit, the governor's Monday order, the expansion of the order, let one-person businesses, dog groomers, small engine repair shops, upholstery and recreational rentals reopen. Curbside customer contact required. Payments must be online or by phone. You agree with me that that's kind of a tweak? At one point, the governor said, I realize these are modest changes.
Well, think about it this way. When the governor first had the second order issued to May 26th, there were questions from people about why go that far? Why are we going out so far when you have other states that were May 1st or late April, especially in this kind of coalition of Midwestern governors who are trying to work together on certain things? Why are we so far? Well, one argument I heard was that even though he's pushing out that far, expect the governor to turn the dial, as he said, on certain things because people feel like, okay, it's getting better. There's some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. So this could be part of that. Now, one of the pushbacks I got this week was, okay, what's changed to allow this to happen? Because remember, his standard for relaxing these, the three-phase step, right? Additional testing capacity, a drop in cases, contact tracing. We don't necessarily have those things yet. So why are these things being relaxed if we haven't met those standards? So you hear them back and forth about it, but it seems like an acknowledgement of, okay, we're going to start trying to move this process along where we begin to relax certain things and get life back to a not normal, but getting us back to some normal routines that we're used to.
Right. In terms of normal routines, then on Tuesday, the governor announced reopening about 36 parks and forests. But it's very important, and if you plan to use one of those parks and forests this week, you ought to know the restrictions. Annual stickers, they must be purchased for parks, although you can walk on the trails without them. The parks will be open reduced hours, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. and not 11 p.m. that you may have been used to. The parks will be closed, shut down on Wednesday, and not of minor importance, all the bathrooms will be closed. And if there's crowds at some of these major popular parks, DNR will limit the number that can go in at any time. So, JR, on Monday, the governor talked about, yes, we had to close the parks. Tuesday, he opened most of them. Was he feeling a lot of public pressure to do so as the weather gets warmer?
Well, remember, he wanted people to go outside and get a mental break from the first order. But what happened was we had a little spell of really good weather there early on, and people flocked to the parks. Look at what they're adding as the conditions for being in the parks. The sticker, I can't remember how much it is, but that adds a physical component to it. Before, you just kind of went out there and showed up for the day. It wasn't a big deal. It's going to help limit the crowds. The closing on Wednesday, not opening the bathrooms, restricting the hours. It's all meant to rein in the number of people who are going out to these parks because the administration argued that led to abuses, the vandalism, overcrowding, trash, and the not paying attention to social distancing requirements that have been put out there to limit the spread of COVID-19.
Right. And Assembly Speaker Robin Vos asked this State Affairs Committee to hold a hearing, which it did yesterday, an informational hearing on the different requests by businesses, WMC, to reopen. It was a very interesting hearing. Missy Hughes, the CEO of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, spoke. The owner of Dane Foundry and another foundry in Wapaka spoke. But it was so continuing the debate over reopening. But at one point, State Representative Republican Mike Schraw said this about, let's put COVID-19, the 316 deaths, into perspective. It's just very interesting what he said. Please.
If you would extrapolate out, let's say we triple the amount of deaths. So we have 1,000 deaths in the state of Wisconsin. And you divide that out by 5.8 million people, comes out to 0.0001. And so I tried to find, just to put it in perspective, I tried to find something that people die from with the same percentages. And the only thing I could find is dying in plane crashes. So what I'm trying to put into perspective is when a plane crashes, it's horrible, it's tragic, but we don't shut the whole economy down. We had business people here today that are probably, going to never open again, or Their sales are down 50%. The longer this goes on, so many other things that the shutdown, is causing, that it's going to be long-term effects. That's my comment to you. Please keep it in perspective.
And another major development this week, and you guys at WisPolitics was the first to break it. Remember the old days when we used to call that a scoop? Anyway, you reported that the governor had ordered his State Secretary of Administration, Joel Brennan, to send out an email to all state agencies cutting spending between now and the end of the fiscal year. Now, that's only 2 months, by 5%. The governor then talked about that at one of the Department of Health Services briefings. But JR, I'm going to borrow what you guys first reported. And the freeze entails no out-of-state travel unless related to the COVID emergency, hiring freeze, suspending raises, bonuses, and other additional compensation for state employees. And the quote from Secretary Brennan, "We will do everything we can to limit ongoing impact on all the state employees, but we also know that waiting any longer to institute cost savings could have an even greater impact on our state's workplace in the months to come." The response was a attaboy from Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, who said, "While we don't know the complete picture for the state's finances yet, we know it's not going to be good. This is a smart, proactive move by the administration." JR, Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald also praised this 5% cut, right?
Yeah, I got a little dig in that, when Republicans want to do this or give the legislature power to do this, that governors ran to the media. We're glad he came around to our way of thinking. I'm paraphrasing Fitzgerald there, but the move is expected to say about $70 million. When you look at the list of exemptions for health and safety dealing with COVID-19, you're not talking a true 5% cut in operations budgets. I mean, that's what some agencies will see, but adding those exemptions is going to be lower than that. It is, though, a down payment. The question becomes what happens next. Don't forget, we went through a great recession a little more than a decade ago. In 2009, if I remember correctly, then Governor Jim Doyle ordered all state employees to take 16 furlough days over a 2-year period. I think the savings about $120 million, give or take a few. But the question is, what's next? We asked Governor Evers about that on one of the calls this week. He said he, basically was considered everything, but wasn't there yet. This was the focus right now. But this is not going to solve the entire issue. We've got more things we have to do to balance the books. It's all said and done, but here's a down payment essentially on that work.
Yeah, and I want to put this in context. The governor had said in a letter to President Trump, "We expect a downturn in GPR revenues of 2%. I looked it up. The Fiscal Bureau memo in January, an eternity ago, a long time, predicted Fiscal Bureau GPR collections of $19.8 billion in the fiscal year starting July 1. If we're not going to get a drop of $2 billion, as the governor told President Trump in that letter, that's a drop of 10%. So, and further context, Assembly Speaker Vos, when they were negotiating the state response to the CARES bill, the federal stimulus, wanted a freeze on spending in the next fiscal year that starts July 1. That was a non-starter, right, JR?
Yeah, well, it also goes up more than $1 billion from year one of the budget to year two. So, look, here's the reality. We may not have a choice but to cut $1 billion in spending because of what's coming down the pipe. Now, the unknowns are the federal government's still debating another stimulus bill that could include direct aid to states to backfill lost
and counties. And counties, you and I saw the appeal from Mark O'Connell. Counties need money. Excuse me.
Now, don't forget, the state's looking at $1.9 billion in the first round of the CARES Act money, but that has to go to COVID-19 expenses. You can't backfill things, as far as I know, at this point. And Fiscal Bureau kind of told me that it can't just be used to take care of the problem. Here's one of the complicating factors is we all got some relief from having filed taxes April 15th. The State Department of Revenue and IRS pushed it back to July 15th. This is the problem for state government, however. Usually there are May reestimates of revenues based off of what we saw from April collections. Our April collections become July collections. So we might not be able to get a good handle on the problem until sometime in late summer. And why that's an issue is it's a 2-year budget. The longer you wait to cut spending, the harder it is because money gets spent every day in state government. If you're not cutting back soon, you're going to have a bigger cut you have to make to something after pick your date this summer when the picture's known.
Okay. Let's move on, but it's on a related subject. State Representative John Nygren, co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee, showed you at WisPolitics a list, an estimate of what the state of Wisconsin could get in COVID-19 relief from the federal government. It totals $3.5 billion, maybe $3.2 if you subtract what you save in Medicaid, but let's not go that deep into the weeds. So let's talk about that. First of all, as you said, JR, Fiscal Bureau and even Speaker Voss has said $1.9 billion in funds controlled by the governor. I'm going to stop you right there because I interviewed Missy Hughes of WEDC yesterday, and she said she had done an ask of the governor for $100 million of that $1.9 billion for a program that she said could be called Restart 72. And that would help businesses in the fall after they have spent their payroll protection plan and SBA loan money. So, and also, JR, potential draws on that $1.9 billion that the governor controls is $50 million from the ag groups. You and I have heard about that, and the governor has said warm things about that, right?
Yep. So I said I was seriously considering it. Interview with an ag publication. Republican lawmakers have pressed him to do that. Look, we had a farm crisis before this all kicked in, right?
Yes,
this has only made it worse. I mean, think about, just at one level, no farmers markets going on. On a deeper level, their kids aren't in school. If they're not in school, they're not buying school lunches. If they're not buying school lunches, there's a demand for the milk and the cheese and the products that go into that. I mean, it has just made a bad situation worse for the farming community in Wisconsin. I've seen estimates from pork producers and beef producers of hundreds of millions of dollars in losses coming because of this situation.
Milk is being dumped and hogs are being euthanized. But anyway, let's go back to the list from Nygren's office, what we may be getting from the federal government in COVID-19 aid, other than the $1.9 billion that the governor controls. K-12 higher education, $240 million. City of Milwaukee, $103 million. Dane County, $95 million. Milwaukee County, $61 million. Child care, welfare, Head Start, $76 million. Bus transit aids, homeless, housing, rent assistance, $46 million. And then I want you to interpret what Representative Nygren told you, JR, or told WisPolitics. If Governor Evers is right and the state will see a decline of over $2 billion in revenues, we should utilize the federal money first in our response to COVID-19. Translation.
Well, there are strings on this money. You have to use it for COVID-19 expenses. Remember, the bill that actually two bills that Governor Evers put out, we're going to spend about $1.1 billion in general purpose revenue combined.
Yeah.
Republicans said, we're not spending any money until we have a better handle on this thing. Let's use the federal money first. So that's what he's talking about. Like, okay, it was a good, and to kind of paraphrase Nygren, good thing we didn't spend that money because we got to figure out how this federal money works first. And that's one thing Republicans have been asking is, how does this all work? We have not seen a public plan yet from the Evers administration of the $1.9 billion, where it's going, how it's being spent. So I think they want to have an accounting of some of this stuff first before they kind of jump into putting state money at the issue, especially because of the drop we're looking at. What money do we have to spend when it's all said and done?
Right. Okay. Next topic. Wisconsin Democrats are scheduled to meet in person, state convention, June 12 and 13 in Wisconsin Dells. This week announced that it'll be an online virtual convention. As I said, they plan online. The decision came after recent reports, several days of more than 200 new positive cases. And just last week, JR, we had a record, let me check the number, 334 positive cases. They're still trying to figure out how to run a convention online. And what are the implications? What are your thoughts on the potential DNC convention, August 17 in Milwaukee? If you were a betting man, finish it.
All right. Well, one, with the Democratic State Convention, there's still, these things that we've been to them, you have a mix of speeches and party business, right? They're kind of a mix of nuts and bolts how the party operates, but also a pep rally for the faithful people who stuff the envelopes, put up the yard signs, man the phone banks, write the checks to get them gassed up for the fall.
Yeah.
For Democrats, there's some business to be done. They've got a vote on 4 members of the National Committee, including Janet Bewley, who's Senate Minority Leader. She's one of them. They have terms that are up. So they have to figure out how to vote on those things. They can do some online speeches. We're not going to be in a room with several hundred people, 1,000 people with Governor Evers speaking and Tammy Baldwin, that kind of thing.
Right.
But for Democrats, they get their rah-rah pep rally in August, right? You got a national convention coming to Milwaukee. We think Dr. How to say his name, Fauci. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing that, but he said that there's a possibility they could still have it. Now there are all kinds of caveats of how many people will be there? How are they going to do this thing? Will it be the original deal we expected? Probably not. If you're not going to pack a baseball stadium of 40,000 people anytime soon this summer, how are you going to fit 10,000 into a basketball arena for a national event? I mean, just stuff like that. How does that going to work?
Right.
But if it goes off, they'd get their chance for that pep rally. Republicans now, they push theirs back from May until July.
Yeah.
So they don't have a local pep rally for activists, right? They're a little bit different situation. Also, don't forget, Republicans are, generally speaking, from the polls, a little more skeptical of COVID-19 than Democrats are. So there's that party business aspect for Republicans. They don't have a national convention in Wisconsin. They do have one in Charlotte. That maybe that comes off. So we'll see. I've talked to people who have some doubts that Republicans pull theirs off, because will you even have a convention center open come July that allow you to bring in 800 people?
Okay.
So keep an eye on that stuff. And the other thing is, even with the pep rally aspect, think about how Wisconsin's been the eye of the storm now for a solid decade, right?
Yes.
And we are that much more the eye of the storm this year. Never mind the edge of the sword when it comes to the presidential election. Our April election was like in the national spotlight for a couple of weeks as the only election held in a pandemic,
right,
with in-person voting. So we are maybe jazzed the gills right now with our activists. So I don't know they need a pep rally, a weekend of speeches to get them gassed up.
Okay, I agree with that. Time's slipping away. Time for your stock pick, sir.
Yeah, so we talked last week about Bewley being elected minority leader. Let's talk about her challenges, okay? One, she has to build a team inside and outside the building. By that, I mean that you don't only have her staff in the Capitol for policy, but the staff at the SSDC for politics. She's got to fundraise. She's got to make sure she's got good candidates. I mean, there is a challenger in front of her to be prepared for the November elections. Good news for her, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin announced a $2 million pot of money. They call it Save the Veto. Republicans have to net 3 seats in each of the houses of the legislature to be able to negate Governor Evers's veto. That $2 million is going to help candidates with resources, staff, those kinds of things. So she's going to have some help, but she faces a challenge of taking over in the middle of the spring and being prepared for the fall.
Okay, just a quick PS. She also comes from Mason, Wisconsin. You can't get any more north than Mason, Wisconsin. Okay, mixed, excuse me.
So Tricia Zonker,
Democrat running in the 7th District special election, May 12th.
For fundraising in the month of April. That's kind of a surprise. I mean, I asked people this week, how she pulled that off. Ideas I heard were, a lot of small dollar donations, a little bit of attention nationally for about this is the next race coming up. Democrats feel jazzed up because they won the Supreme Court race in April, had really good turnout. But looking at the big picture, yeah, she outraised by Tom Tiffany by like some $10,000 or something. But he's raised $1.2 million. She's about $300,000 for the entire race. The nature of the district, it leans pretty hard Republican. We've seen more outside help for Tiffany than for Zonker. Okay. He just has the factors in his favor. Yeah. The caveat is it's a special election in May in a pandemic. We've seen a big push toward mail balloting. Do Democrats have any sliver of hope they can pull off a big upset because of those factors? Maybe, but I think the betting money right now is on Tiffany.
Okay, you only got 30 seconds for falling.
I think we have the UW system employees. We saw furlough plans now from, I think, at least half dozen campuses. UW-Madison now has implemented its furlough plan. It has a tiered system for if you make this much money, you lose this many days, and you're on the system. Look, go back to what I said before. We know there's going to be pain. Here's an example of pain for UW employees. When is it going to hit the rest of the state employee population? Because, again, like 11 years ago, we saw 16 days of furloughs for state employees under Jim Doyle. Governor Evers said, hey, we're focused on this right now with the $70 million we're going to try and save. But this is not the end of the story for state employees looking at some little pinch the pocketbook because of what's going on with COVID-19.
Okay, we're going to end the show with a clip from Governor Evers. He was asked, what about none of the men can get haircuts? How do you feel about that, Governor? It's a very interesting answer. It's very short. Please.
I hear many talking about how badly they need a haircut, their kids. What can you tell us about how you and your staff have navigated this challenge of not using personal care professionals? Thank you.
Just get up every day and comb your hair. I don't know what else to say. That's what I do. I haven't been to a stylist or barber in months. and months, probably well before the pandemic. So wash my hair every day, comb it, and go to work.
So, yes, I need a haircut, but I apparently can't get one until the governor does. And JR, it doesn't look like it's an issue with you.
I don't judge anybody when it comes to that stuff, Steve.
I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
That's Rewind from May 1.
Rewind, your week in review, is sponsored by the Wisconsin Realtors Association, bringing Wisconsin communities to life with great homes, businesses, and neighborhoods. The Wisconsin Realtors Association, the voice of real estate.